forestry element to the general plan update. Provide direction to staff regarding the inclusion of agriculture and forest industry element into the general plan update. Environmental Management Agency and Department of Agriculture. Brought to us by Mayor Lutz.
Good morning, Mayor Lutz, Agricultural Commissioner. Good morning, Chair Thomas, members of the board. Before you this morning is a draft agriculture and forestry element, which is a result of over a year's worth of work by the Agricultural Coalition. For those of you who do not know, the Agricultural Coalition is a group of individuals committed to agriculture, representing the 4 recognized agricultural groups in the county, those being the Calaveras County Farm Bureau, Calaveras County Wine Grape Alliance, Calaveras County Cattlemen's Association, and Calaveras Growing. Mr. Thomas, staff recommends the board receive this draft agriculture and forestry element from the Ag Coalition and direct appropriate staff to work with the coalition to refine this element for submittal to mid-tier harness for inclusion in the general plan update. It is the intention of the Agricultural Coalition to have this agriculture and forestry element as a separate element in the general plan update. For a brief history, on August 5, 2008, the coalition submitted to the board the first draft of the agriculture and forestry element. Since that date, the coalition has met with then Planning Director Robert Selman and then interim Director of Community Development Agency John Taylor to review the document. The coalition has also met with community groups. Ken Churches, our farm advisor, was instrumental in facilitating many of these meetings and editing the various drafts of the element. Janice Elliott, Assistant County Counsel, has also reviewed the element. And I would just like to make it clear that the recommendation today is to receive this draft and direct appropriate staff to work with the coalition to prepare the element for submittal to mid-tier harness. So at this time, I can address questions from the board. However, Mr. Thomas, representatives from the coalition are present today, and it may be more appropriate for these representatives to respond to your questions and concerns.
Okay, at this time I'd like to just get a sense for how many people are going to be wishing to address the board on this side. If I see a show of hands, it's 1, 2, 3, there must be more. I don't see only 3. 2 to 4.
When I ask the question, if you have questions, there will be more.
Okay, well, I just want to remind everybody that in the interest of time, I'm going to be enforcing the 5-minute rule. So keep your comments clear and concise. If you hear somebody making the exact same comment that you intend to make, consider it said. So, all right. Do any board members wish to ask any questions of Mary?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mary. All right. First speaker. Morning, Addie.
Good morning. I'm Addie Jacobson, and today I'm representing the Board of Ethics Task Force Watch, and thank you for the opportunity to get to speak with you. In the interest of time, I'm going to just read the comments I have here, and then I'm going to give you copies of them. I apologize that I had to add something late, and my printer quit working to make enough copies, so some of them have the addition just written into it. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the proposed agriculture and forestry element for the general plan update. Ethics Task Force Watch supports inclusion of a separate agriculture and forestry element to the general plan update. Both agricultural and forest lands are vital and important to Calaveras County, providing multifold values to the county. Agriculture is a critically important economic driver in the county, provides open space, and maintains the county's traditional character. Calaveras' forests are also critically important, not only as a commodity source, but also for water supply, reliability and quality, recreation and tourism, which promotes the county's economic vitality, wildlife and plant habitat and diversity, carbon sequestration, and aesthetic and scenic values. EPFW believes it's important for these two county resources to be discussed separately rather than being incorporated in a piecemeal fashion within several other general plan elements. The issues, policies, and implementation measures for them deserve a full and integrated review and presentation. EPFW therefore urges the Board of Supervisors to support the inclusion of this separate element in the updated general plan. And then these are specific things within the element. EPFW urges creation of a separate Forest Lands Advisory Commission. The currently proposed Agricultural Advisory Committee would have significant input over decisions and policies for lands within its purview. EPFW believes that the agricultural lands and the forestry lands within Calaveras County are both significant, but that each has unique needs, issues, and character. Those people best suited to oversee decisions and policy for the county's agricultural lands may not be the best to take on those roles for the forested lands, and vice versa. Therefore, EPFW suggests that a Forest Lands Advisory Commission be formed to address issues and policies related to both mixed conifer and oak forest lands in Calaveras County. Members of the Forest Lands Advisory Commission would represent a broad base of stakeholders in Calaveras forests, bringing interest, expertise, and knowledge pertaining to this vital county resource. These stakeholders could include representatives from small forest landowners, industrial timber interests, conservation and environmental groups including watershed councils, recreational and tourism businesses, water districts, fire districts, state lands, homeowners groups, and oak woodlands. Such a commission would provide a balanced and knowledgeable base from which to address forest issues and policy, helping to assure sustainable decisions to meet all county interests and address the many significant values related to our forests. EPFW therefore urges the Board of Supervisors to create a Forest Lands Advisory Commission. And the last suggestion is that EPFW urges inclusion of a zoning overlay on current TPZ lands. The current TPZ zoning of a significant portion of Calaveras County assures that it remains essentially open space, even while being used for productive purposes. It is important that this continue into the future. Other counties have recently faced requests to have TPZ lands removed from TPZ zoning. Doing this without a county decision of the future of such lands allows for the possibility for such lands becoming very different in character. For instance, it is possible that they may be converted to residential, retail, or commercial uses. Doing so diminishes county character and quality of life valued by residents and may permanently alter the land and destroy the important values served by it. As Calaveras County values the forest enough to forego significant tax revenues in order to keep them as forested lands, it is clear that protecting them into the future is also in the county's best interest. Therefore, EPFW urges the Board of Supervisors to create a zoning overlay in the updated general plan to include all current TPZ lands within its open space or conservation zoning designation in order to assure that such lands do not change character if removed from TPZ zoning in the future. Thank you for the chance to voice our opinions and for your serious consideration of our suggestions.
You must have rehearsed that. You're right on time. Thank you, Ed.
Do you have copies of that?
I do.
The next speaker, please.
My name is Al Segal. I'm representing the Calaveras County Tax Association. Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors, thank you for the honor of making comments on this issue. The Tax Association recommends that you do not create an element. It's another level of bureaucracy. The goals, which I think we all share, to enjoy the rural atmosphere and cattle land and farms and such, should not be saddled with a new bureaucracy. And imposing the element on the people of Calaveras County in the general plan actually imposes those things on the board of supervisors as well. Because changing the general plan is a very, very difficult thing once you realize that you've made a mistake. We're putting too many elements in the general plan now, and the consequences of these are going to be felt for years to come. And other supervisors are going to have to cope with this if we're going to remain a free society in Calaveras County. I had some experience with, it seems like we're driven by lobbyists. These are groups of people that have particular interests. Some of these interests combine into coalitions, sometimes do the same thing. And agricultural commissions are really lobbies for the agricultural community. Duh. I mean, that's what they're there for. I came into contact with their successes at a commercial project that I was helping to put together in Shawnee County. And we went before because it was adjacent to agricultural land, we went before the Agricultural Commission. They wanted to have a buffer zone of 100 feet. That 100-foot buffer zone almost wiped out all of our property. We pleaded and pleaded to make it smaller. Well, they made it a little bit smaller, just enough that we can get to do something with our land. Now, if fairness would take place, and this lobby didn't have so much power within government, the buffer zone would be on the other side, on the agricultural side, because it's for their benefit, not for the little commercial piece that we had. So, personally, I've experienced the power of a lobby group that becomes a government department. Another good example is the banking industry. The most powerful lobby in the banking industry is the FIP. It's a private outfit. It represents the bankers. Look what they've done recently. Wow. You have to rethink this business of responding to special interest groups and lobbies. It seems as though there's an excellent book by a fellow by the name of Frederick Bustier. The name of the book is The Law. And in it he talks about America and also forms of government and economics. In economics, he says that there's 4 forms. The few plunder the many plunder the few, and everybody plunders everybody else. It's universal plunder, which is also a good definition of socialism. And the last one is the absence of plunder. America is based on the absence of plunder. How often, right here, do you see people come before you to give you tax money? And maybe 98% of all the information you handle is divvying up money that's been plundered from the taxpayer. I represent the 2%. If we could bear in mind that creating more bureaucracy is not economically sound, and also it's a violation of our property rights. And that is 5 minutes?
Yeah, 1 minute.
Oh, 1 minute go. I'm going to run out of things to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Segal.
Thanks, Al.
My turn is Reach. I'm Steve
Hi, Steve.
Fairchild, mostly in the tourism business. Past president of the Chamber of Commerce, once director at Everstate, business bureau president for the NCA, National Trade Association, and hired by International, Korea, China, Greece, Canada twice to consult on tourism and things like that.
And the Calaveras County character.
And Calaveras, man, they don't have one. This is a tough one. If I owned Calaveras County, I could just gate around it. Let people in there, one in there, and now I don't. But and all you would need is five. But I don't. It's a lot of private landowners, and when we bought that property maybe a long time ago. I was here more than half my life so far. When I bought the land, and I expected it had certain rights that came with it, and we don't want people taking those away from me. In my case, I own about 500 acres in Calaveras County. I pay taxes on it, about $20,000 $1,000 a year, I believe, something like that. There are no trespassing signs on my property. The only fences up were put up when they built highway, Paris Railroad. I didn't even want those there. Anybody come on my property, walk around, and enjoy it anytime. Somebody tried in the middle of the night, I don't know what they're doing. But anyway, so my sympathies are with open lands. I put my money there, it's going to stay that way. It's my choice. I'm kind of reluctant to force people to my values at their expense. And some of it, a few months ago we had a hearing here about the Williamson Act, and somebody asked what does it cost, and to Reed's credit, she was the only one that actually came up with an answer. It's about $1 an acre to get that for non-prime, and about $5 for prime, or something like that. I looked and looked and looked to see what does that mean, and couldn't find really much data. What does it really cost? And that is what this is all about. It's basically subvention properties. We have 134,000 acres in subvention properties in Cavaliers County. We get reimbursed about $197,000 in 2006 from the state. Average is about $1.47 an acre. The current value, if you look at the way it's assessed, it's about $57 million worth of property. We would have probably collected about $672,000 in taxes from that. Counties and cities get about 29% of that. The rest of it, 71%, goes to schools, colleges, and special things. So the county would have gotten back then, 29% of that 600 would be $195,000. It turns out to be just about exactly the same figure that they actually did. So that's kind of a wash there. The problem is that I took a look at property that's advertised that's equivalent to what is in the subvention program. It's way undervalued. The real value, in my opinion, these are numbers I generated. It's just my own research, and I have a bit on a busy schedule, so maybe they're all wrong, but it looks to me like the actual value of the subvention properties in this county about $660 million. The taxes on that would be about $6.6 million in property tax if it were collected, I think. 29% of that would have been returned to the county for about $1,900,000. We got $197,000. Somehow, about $1.7 million disappeared. Did that get shifted to other people? Somebody else has to pay that tax? I don't know. But that's the cost, right? In my estimation, because I couldn't find any other information. The state gave away $39 million a year, in this, and that's the return. It should be, if the land is valued at its real value, about $390 million a year. There's a loss there of $351 million a year to the state, or to the state. Over the last, since 1973, when the subvention program started, they've given back $762 million. It should be, in that same period of time, if you calculate out the real value of those lands, $7.6 billion.
Mr. Fairchild, you're going just a little over the 5 minutes, so.
Okay. Well, the question is the $7.6 billion that we have in the state government spend. Is that really what we want to do with that money? And that really is the question. The rights and all those are. Are there any questions? If you have better data, I'd like to know.
Yes, I will. The county receives 18 cents on the dollar in property tax. We do not receive 29. 1.2 goes to roads, and about 16.7 goes to the general. 16.7 cents goes to the general fund. So we receive substantially less than the 29 cents on the
That
dollar.
would include the 11% goes to cities, I don't know that. 11% goes to cities, 18% for the county, and then the rest goes to colleges and so forth.
I'm not sure what the city's share is.
Huh?
The county share of property tax dollar is 1.2 to roads, 16.7 to the general fund. Is that right, Mr. Lawton?
Spot on, Supervisor.
The actual reimbursement, $197,000 that I had, is that accurate to your?
I think that's about what we receive from subventions, Mary, is that?
And what's that? My point was that I think if the land were not in subvention, if it were free enterprise, developed, used, sold, subdivided, whatever, it would probably be about 10 times that. So there's not just a matter of what we're getting back, but what we're not getting because we've locked up the land from its higher use. My sympathies is, great, don't do that. I don't want to see subdivisions, and I said, put my money where my mouth is. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to comment? Morning, Tom.
Good morning, Tom Casino, Calaveras Planning Coalition. For months now, as you've heard, the agricultural interests from around the county have cooperated in drafting an agriculture and forestry element for the general plan. They've made their element drafts available for public review and comment on the Agricultural Extension website. They sent representatives to the Calaveras Planning Coalition meetings to hear our concerns about their element drafts, and we were pleased to be their host. The result of their efforts is the draft agriculture and forestry element that is before you today. 3 years ago, I stood before this board and I provided some advice on how to proceed with the comprehensive update of the general plan. On that day, I stressed that you should seize the day by harnessing the energy of enthusiastic people to craft solutions to ongoing challenges. The Agricultural Coalition has done that. At that time, I advised you to improve on what others have done. In drafting the agriculture and forestry element, the Agricultural Coalition has done that by drawing on and adapting programs from other communities for their use here in Calaveras County. Also at that time, I advised the board to leave no one behind. While we feel that there are areas of the draft element that continue to need work, we also feel that this draft element is a very, very good start. We hope that you will accept this draft element and direct your planning staff and consultants to improve the draft as it moves through further staff, public, and environmental review. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have anybody else wishing to comment? Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll close the public hearing and
Would you like me to start, or?
do the biggest rancher on the,
I guess I'll start.
on the board.
I have a lot of concerns with the draft element as it is presented. In my opinion, it has way too much government involvement in agriculture involved in it. What I'm looking for is something that will protect those that wish to, those that are currently in agriculture, or those that wish to become involved in agriculture. And when I say protect, I think they need to be protected. The two main things they need to be protected from is, number one, is rural sprawl, and number two is urban encroachment. And if you take a look at the document in front of us, it basically almost has government take over, county government take over control of agriculture. And I don't want county government to take over control of agriculture. If you look at a property right, and you ask what are the characteristics of a property right, the characteristics are basically use, control, and disposal of the property. This element would severely restrict, in my opinion, all three of those characteristics. And so, if you'd like me to just sort of go through it a little bit, I don't plan on taking a lot of time. The first thing I note is that I think someplace in here we need to note that agriculture needs to be defined as a commercial purpose. I know we've had this discussion in the past, and I know there's a lot on the committee that don't want to define agriculture as a commercial purpose. But I think if we're going to have a viable agricultural element, we need to be very clear that we're talking about agriculture as a viable as a commercial purpose, and not somebody having chickens in their backyard or whatever. We just had a gentleman from Mountain Ranch, Chief, to help me, who was complaining about the neighbor's roosters crowing and all this sort of thing. And I don't think we want to get into that level of, I don't think that's what we're talking about when we're talking about agriculture. We're talking about a commercial intent and a commercial purpose. Let's just go through this. I'm all for agricultural lands being defined as a vital resource and providing protection. But I guess the question becomes is what is providing protection? Let me just speak briefly to Allison Gall's comments. I think what I do agree with in here is I think a reasonable setback and a reasonable design of projects that are against agricultural lands should be done. I think as you get rural sprawl or urban encroachment, I think fencing and some of those requirements so that you don't have constant acts of trespass from the urban or the residential development onto the agricultural lands, I think that's appropriate. I guess I'll just go through this sort of page by page. If you go to page 4, where we finally get into the start into the meat of the element, under policy it says agricultural lands shall be identified and maintained for the purposes of conserving, protecting, and encouraging. I'm all for shall be identified, but I'm not for shall be maintained. I mean, things change, and people have a right to have agricultural land, and they have a right, if they own property, to say, I don't wish to have agricultural land, I wish to have residential, or I wish to have commercial, or industrial, or other types of uses. To say you shall just sort of maintain it until, global warming or Armageddon takes us all, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, there has to be flexibility. There has to be some recognition that this is privately owned property. It's not a public good. And the private component also needs to be recognized. Let me go over it. There are several places in here where I think don't belong in an agricultural element. They belong in the land use element. We're going to have an open space element. We're going to come up with a habitat conservation plan. We're going to come up with a lot of these things. So there's a lot of things in here where you have like minimum parcel sizes or other kinds of issues. And I think a lot of what's addressed in here as far as rural sprawl can be addressed if the board basically puts a very high emphasis on residential, commercial, and industrial development taking place where there's public water, public surface appropriated water, where there's public sewers, and there's roads to county standards, and I have spoken strongly for that in the past. And if we can hold to that, and you have a very fine section in here where you talk about, we want the infill projects and we want those sort of things. And of course, the problem with infill projects and community centers is that's where the people live, and they all show up and oppose it because they don't want any more traffic on the roads, and they don't want any more people in their communities. And we all put that in all these planning documents because that's what all the good planners say we should do, and I agree. But just try to do the infill developments. And one of the reasons we have so much rural sprawl is because that's where people don't live, and there's a lot less pressure to stop it. We should stop it. Secondly, the board has made a commitment to, it's currently in place, whether it will remain, I don't know, but if you're not on sewer, water, and roads, you have to have a 40-acre minimum. And I am strongly in favor of that. You talk all kinds of places in here where you have minimums. In fact, you have them going down, I think, to 5 acres on some ag land without sewer, water, and roads to cover the standard. So I'm a strong advocate of a 40-acre minimum parcel size for two reasons. Number one, I think 40 acres does allow at least for improved agriculture to be viable. And secondly, that as we do expand urban development from the community centers, you need to have a big enough parcel so you can get enough lots so that you can pay to extend the sewer and the water lines and build the roads and pay for capacity improvements to the sewer and water plants. And you can't do that if you have a two-parcel split. You have to have big enough parcels, and in fact, I think the 40-acre minimum should be larger. That's what the board has agreed on at this point in time. You have to have a parcel big enough so that you can provide the infrastructure when development comes forward, and that also, in my opinion, will do a lot to protect agriculture. But that doesn't belong, I don't think, in the agricultural element. We have things in here where there's a lot of mitigation, and I will just tell you, frankly, from page 23 on, I'm strongly in disagreement. I don't think anything from page 23 on where it's 2 to 1. I mean, if you did those kinds of mitigations, you just shut down economic activity in the town. I mean, who can afford to buy a piece of ground that is currently grazing, and by 2 acres for each acre is going to be developed? I mean, you've got a cost of housing where all we'll have is Holly Mines is low-cost subsidized housing and millionaire housing. And there'll be any middle-class housing. Hopeful to such a deal. You heard somebody this morning talking about, well, for endangered species, it has to be a 3 to 1 acre mitigation. Well, for agriculture, it has to be 2 to 1. I mean, how many acres are we going to buy to build a house? And quite frankly, Holly Mines and others bring up the housing element. And we have an obligation to provide housing. You can't just basically say, well, the rest of the county's agriculture is going to issue another building permit, but just build on those on those properties that basically have no grazing and are basically unimproved properties in community centers, and nothing else is going to take place. And that's what would happen if you go beyond that. And quite frankly, a lot of what goes beyond page 23 and beyond is already in state law, and we're going to incorporate that in other elements, whether it be the habitat mitigation plan, whether it be the open space element, whether it be all these other things in state law. Quite frankly, I think state law has gone overboard, so I obviously don't want to go beyond state law on mitigation, and I'm not interested in seeing if we can provide housing prices even higher than the word for the bus, because the bus will end, and then we're going to have to do additional housing, and we need to at least have it affordable to the middle class. We can't get it down to the lower classes. We try to get it to the lower classes, and now we have a huge economic bust as a consequence of it. On page 6, you talk about the Agriculture Advisory Committee shall review all discretionary development applications. I'm not in favor of that. We have a planning commission, we have a board of supervisors. I don't want another governmental review authority. I've spoken in community centers, a lot of times they want design and scenic review committees that have to review all development before I went on a platform, went away with that, and we did away with it in Murphy's. And it's never come back, although it often comes up. Patty just brought up the Forest Advisory Committee. I'm not in favor of everything going through the Forest Advisory Committee before it goes to the Planning Commission. You can have all the groups, and we have this Ag Advisory Group, but it's totally private, and it's totally voluntary, and it's not an action of government. And forest people can do the same thing. And you can certainly be on the list to review all applications that have anything to do with a zone change from an agricultural zone to some other zone. You can be on the list and get everything. I don't think it should be I don't think you or the Forest Advisory Committee or Design and Scenic Review Committee should have a governmental role prior to a project going to the Planning Commission. You should have input on that project. The other thing I didn't mention is we still have the CEQA, the EIR process and the CEQA process. And a lot of what's addressed after page 23, I think some of that is also addressed in the CEQA process. So I'm not interested in having something that's just going to be totally duplicative, and I'm not in favor of having something that's greater than state law. Obviously, we will meet state law. We have to do that. Here's the part. Page 7, and basically the policy is to reduce pressure on agricultural lands. The implementation members develop standards and criteria for the proper utilization of cluster development, which I'm a huge advocate and was a huge advocate, and it's in our zoning ordinances now. I was a huge advocate of putting it in back when we did it just quite a few years ago. But it says a cluster development within or adjoining agricultural land, streamline the permitting process associated with higher density and infill development. Pay attention to that. When you get into things like 2-to-1 mitigation, transfer of development rights, all those sort of things, I'm not in favor of. I'm in favor of protecting people that are in agriculture now, or want to be in agriculture, or want to stay in agriculture. But I'm not for taking the property rights away and having a huge diminution of property values as a consequence for being in agriculture. I'm not in favor of that. We talk here on page 8. We have a couple policies, etc. And it's under water. And I just give a brief comment. I think one of the things we need to do when we do the water element, and I'm sure there's some controversial and probably going to happen, I think we should set a sense of priority for wells. And I think the first priority for well water should be agriculture, because we want residential development, commercial development, and industrial development to be on public appropriated water systems, and we want them to be on public sewer systems, and we want them to have kind of roads to high standards. And one of the ways of doing that is basically saying if you're going to drill a well and you're not using it for agricultural purposes, that your use is secondary to the needs of agriculture. And if we have droughts and we have other issues going in, or somebody wants to put in a vineyard and drill a well, the residences around can't come and say, well, we're worried it's going to affect our wells. To me, the priority on wells should be agriculture for well water, and residential, commercial, and industrial should be either in the community centers or have the infrastructure that I would like to see that agriculture need not provide. Okay, I talked about commercial purpose, but at the bottom of that page it says whether or not for the purpose of producing income. And then you list a bunch of stuff. And I think it needs to have a commercial intent. Otherwise, we're just going to get in big trouble. Okay, I told you I'm for the fencing. I've been for the fencing for lots of years, particularly in commercial conditional use permits when we're storage units all over the county. We're stepping them out, basically outside of the community centers because they needed lower land values, and they were causing a lot of problems. And I think I just think all of it. I don't think, given the public benefits that come from agriculture, the open space and the wildlife, etc., I don't think it's too much to ask for a reasonable buffer, and having the board have the ability for reasonable variances. So if you're like an house, if you have such a small parcel, you basically take away the whole value of the value of the parcel, and not for that. And the other is to provide fencing and provide some obligation for maintaining the fence. Because if you're a rancher, you have zillions of miles of fencing. If you've got a bunch of homes up against you, or their backyard fence there's 30 feet of it, and the kids are climbing over it and falling over it, and a cow gets out. And this happens to my family. A cow got out, and this was in the city limits of Angels, so we have 70 acres actually of the ranch. There are 65 acres that are in the city limits. And a cow got out, and the guy just paid for his driveway, and he wanted me to repave his driveway. I wanted to pay him. I said, no, I'm not repaving the driveway. So he didn't get prominent casino suit, so it went away. But they have a backyard fence, it's 30 feet, and I can't maintain all that. And I'm not even around seeing it, and they're seeing it in kids are fine. Doing what they do. So I don't mind, particularly on residential. I think and even industrial or commercial, they don't want their fence anyway. So I'm all for that. We have that here on page 10. We encourage private organization and land trusts in the utilization of conservation easements or other alternative conservation methods. And then you get into it, I think, more after page 23. I'm very leery of that. I'm very leery of anything that happens that you put the term perpetuity with. From an economic, if you talk to any economist or like, they will tell you the whole concept of perpetuity is just peace. Nothing happens in perpetuity. And the movement of capital and financial assets, usually the forest average protects about 20 years. And the idea is just tying up capital and financial resources in perpetuity, like we know what the future's going to hold in perpetuity. That's the height of arrogance, in my opinion. We don't have a clue, but 20 years or 30 years or 50 years from today, brains, let alone going further out than that. And the other comment I give on those is it always surprises me. I can't ever say environmental community because I'm targeting people. People come in and they want our general plan, and they want all these elements, and then we just plan it to death, and we have every detail. And then we get things that some people like conservation easements, transfer development rights, all this stuff, and we have no control. There's no plan at all. You might as well put a map out where it's up, throw a dart at it. They can put it anywhere. They can put it right in the middle where you want growth to be, or where you want the sewer plant to be, or the spray field, or anything. We plan, and then we get this whole group of sort of mitigations, and there's no planning at all. The Board of Supervisors has, if you want to do a conservation easement, you're not going to get permission from the Board of Supervisors. You can just stick it anywhere. But any other zone change or anything, you have to come to the Board of Supervisors for use. So one of the problems I have with all this mitigation, and I always have had, is there's absolutely no planning on the mitigation. You have no consequence of what the development consequences are. You don't even have any idea of what the environmental consequences are of putting a conservation easement in. If you did any zone change to anything, you have to do through an environmental review. Maybe you get a negative deck, maybe you're required to do an EIR. But if you do the things environmental, they want you to do, you can just go with hard at the map on that end of the spectrum, which makes no sense at all. Because what's the point of all the planning and where we want development and residential and all this, if you can just put a conservation easement right in the way of it. So the idea that we're just going to willy-nilly throw conservation easements around makes no sense at all to me. And here, one place, I don't think you meant it this way, but it says maintain support and funding for basic and applied research and outreach through the UC Cooperative Extension Program. So when you say maintains support and funding. I'm hoping we don't say that we want agriculture, or if we convert from agricultural land, we're supposed to fund, Lucy Bates. I'm not for that. Okay, so let me just finish then with Addie. Addie, she gave us. So if we go to page 13, where we get into forest land conservation and production, it says to maintain healthy and sustainable forests that provide for raw materials while limiting the intrusion of incompatible uses into important forest lands. So I guess I have a question. Does Best Forest Watch an incompatible use with forestry? One of the things I think we need to put in here is that all timber harvest plans that are approved by the Board of Forestry are acceptable harvest methods in Calaveras County. I mean, if we can't keep forestry economically viable, then we'll lose it. One of the reasons, if you look at today's environment, given the volume of imports and the downturn in housing, even Sierra Pacific Industries is having a very difficult time. Because all forest products companies, whether it's Weyerhaeuser or whatever, look what happened to the price of Weyerhaeuser in the stock market. So I would like to have something that basically says in here that just that all timber harvest plans approved by the Board of Forestry, who are the experts on forestry practices. I don't think we need another committee in the county to decide what are acceptable forestry practices. I think that is the place of the Board of Forestry, and that those will be acceptable forestry practices in Calaveras County. Here's what you have in here, I guess, because I marked it on page 14 under policy 1.4.1.1. You say below 3,000 feet in elevation, this is the forestry element, subdivisions of land adjoining land zone TPC containing 40 acres or less may be considered for the creation of new parcels of not less than 10 acres. So I'm not for that. I don't think anything should be less than 40 unless you're on public water or public sewer and have roads to kind of standards. I don't think we should be encouraging development of rural sprawl up into the forestry lands, and I think that would do so. Okay, and here again it has, I think added here on her, what she calls the Forest Lands Advisory Commission. Here you have the County Agricultural Advisory Committee shall evaluate all discretionary applications, and I'm not there. I think things need to go to the Planning Commission, and the private sector can have their own organizations that will provide input to the Planning Commission and subsequently to the Board of Supervisors. And then you get to page, here, well, not page 23. Here's another one. You have new parcels on page 17. New parcels created adjoining agricultural land should be large enough, 5-acre minimum, and I'm not for 5-acre minimum. I think that's an absolute disaster for 5-acre minimum. So I'll go back to what I think should be 40, but it's currently 40.
Supervisor Tran, are you getting close to the end?
Yeah. So the rest of it, I think, is basically all this mitigation for changing your zoning. And I don't think in the ag element we should have a whole lot of mitigation for changing your ag zoning. I mean, if we're in ag and we have ag zoning, that's a good thing, but I don't think we should be punished for having done so. To the extent some law is going to punish us, then that belongs in the land use element or the open space element. Not, in my opinion, in an agricultural way. So that completes my comments.
Hi all. How are you guys doing? First of all, I just want to point out that...
Scott?
Yeah, sorry.
If you can just wait just a second, we're kind of taking comments with the board. So
I apologize.
I'll give you a chance to talk in a second. Whether it's down toward the end. Supervisor Willis, are you up to making comments?
I imagine so. I'll still wonder after that why I have a reputation as the long-winded one. can prove why in a moment. I think that the premise for this document is an excellent one. And tragically, almost every other rural county in California has managed to figure out how to avoid this moment of reckoning before they lose their ag lands. Right now, Calaveras County is 75% of its lands, unlike many other counties that are still rural, in private holding. A good portion of that is in ag land. And whether you care about land stewardship, water quality, and quantity, by the way, oaks, species preservation, whatever it is, you have a litany of people, of issues and complaints, I should say, and people advocating for this wide range of issues, without a whole lot of recognition of the central role that ag plays in dealing with all of it. Good stewardship of our ranch lands is actually what has created probably the best economic opportunities and the best look and quality of life that we could possibly have achieved. And it's true, it's been in the hands of a few private individuals and families that have been with us for a long time, many of them and some more recent. The premise of getting something that addresses preservation and continuation of ag as a viable industry in this county is the central premise of this, and it's a good one. We've had also, along with it, a good process. If there was a comment that people actually started with the ag community coming together across previous boundary lines and coming up with a unified proposal. But that proposal has been vetted with traditional opponents and all kinds of folks out there. And it's been honed to some extent. While not a perfect document, it is, I think, a sound basis for discussion, which is, I think, what its intent is. Today, our purpose is not to write or rewrite it. It's to make a fundamental decision about whether we want to have a separate and distinct ag element, whether the issues involved in this draft are significant enough, important enough to us to warrant that kind of unique and special treatment. My belief is that the case has been well made, both in this document and in previous hearings and discussions for that. So I support a separate ag element. There are things in here that I think could be improved, and there are things that I very much support. But the thing that I think is also central is that we've got to take a look, and this does borrow from counties that have been more successful. I see language from El Dorado, for instance, that I think may have found its way in here. There are other ideas that have come from other places, and some that are unique and special to our own situation. So it's been crafted in a way that I think has been quite inclusive in its approach. It also recognizes that without measures, we can talk all we want about our ideologies, and I'll give you three that I thought were just remarkable today. The idea of what is a higher use, Mr. Fairchild. I think it is a question of what's a higher use. But the idea that the higher use is always the highest density. Not long ago, the higher use for the ag land that now is a vacant subdivision outside in San Joaquin County, south of Mountain House. As I understand it, the vast majority of those homes are foreclosed. And yet some of it was on prime ag land. Those are mistakes, folks, and as we deal